average youth population in Kenya is 35 years or 35% of the total population of the country. Further aware that majority of this population is in the job market entry level, noting that Article 55 of the Constitution obligates the state to take measures to ensure that the youth access employment. The member is concerned that this access is hindered by the requirement to produce numerous documentation, including a tax compliance certificate from the Kenya Revenue Authority, certificate of good conduct from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, higher education loan clearance certificate from Higher Education Loans Board, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission clearance, as well as the Credit Reference Certificate from the Credit Reference Bureau. The member is further concerned that these documents cost not less than 4,500 through the Ministry of Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs to waive the payment of these fees by job-seeking youth in the country, and further urges the ministry to immediately fast-track implementation of the National Employment Authority Act, which requires the establishment and maintenance of an integrated and up-to-date database of all persons seeking employment. This particular motion had been conclusively debated, and what is remaining is for the question to be put for the members to choose whether to adopt it or otherwise. This morning, another motion which question will be put on is the declaration of cancer as a national disaster and establishment disease, noting that effective treatments require availability of specialists, chemotherapy services, essential drugs for pain management, and adequate infrastructure in treatment and avoidance of distant referral and delays in treatment administration. Further aware that there is need for clear policies concerning terminal pain management, financial and human resource support, and palliative care for cancer patients. This House urges the government to declare cancer a national disaster and establish a cancer fund to cater for cancer treatment and care. That motion has already been debated, and the question will be put. There will also be another motion by the Honourable Member for Makueni County, Honourable Rose Musel, on the establishment
offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people. We beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country, and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen. Order, members. We don't seem to have the required quorum. Therefore, I order the bell to be rung for 10 minutes.
Contributed to the noted cases of suicide, homicides, and violence at households level. Further noting that despite the strategies and guidelines that the government has put in place towards achieving the highest standard of mental health, prevalence of mental disorders remain high. This House suggests that the government to birth in Kenya must be registered by the Department of Civil Registration and documented through a birth certificate. Further aware that subsequent registration of citizens and acquisition of documentation such as identity cards and passports, school admissions, registration of exams, and access to opportunities such as employment depends and relies on birth certificate. The member is deeply concerned that the Department of Civil Registration Services has over time experienced backlogs in the issuance of birth certificates as a result of, among other factors, inadequate personnel and willingness to embrace information, communication, and technology, inadequate funding, inadequate materials used in registration of persons. The member is further deeply concerned that registration services are not easily accessible to majority of Kenyans owing to the few registration centers in place. So this House urges that the government considers establishing civil registration centers in every constituency and ensure full implementation of the Kenya Citizens and Foreign Nationals Management Systems have been implemented in Kenya since 1980s with a varying degree of success and with heavy reliance on foreign aid and management, noting that the Kenyan government introduced a homegrown school feeding program, also known as HGSFP, in 2009, a more sustainable and nationally integrated program by the national government-funded school meals program through multi-sectoral cooperation, appreciating that the school feeding program has played an integral part in realizing the country's goal of universal primary education through insensitizing the enrollment and retention of children, further noting that the feeding program targets food inequality in the most vulnerable areas of Kenya, including schools for business to commence. The number required is 50 members, but as it currently stands, that particular number has not been achieved. So a quick recap of the business this morning. 2 motions which have already been debated will be urging or will be asking this House to urge the government to urgently establish programs and interventions to encourage uptake of counseling services among individuals, families and communities to mitigate effects of mental disorders. And if time allows, there will be another motion which will be moved and debated before this House by it will be moved by the Honourable Member for Gilgil constituency. And this particular motion is on the establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency. This House urges the government to consider establishing civil registration.
Majority of this population is in job market entry level, noting that Article 55 of the Constitution obligates the state to take measures to ensure that youth access employment, concerned that the access is hindered by requirements to produce numerous documentation including tax compliance, that's by KRA, certificate of good conduct, higher education loan clearance certificate, ESCC clearance, credit reference bureau. Further concerned that these documents cost not less than 4,500 shillings to acquire, deeply concerned that most of the job seekers in the youth bracket cannot raise this prohibitive amount for purposes of job application. This House urges the government through the Ministry of Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs to waive the payment of these fees by job-seeking youth in the country, and further urge the ministry to immediately fast-track implementation of the National Employment Authority Act, which requires the establishment and maintenance of an integral and up-to-date database of all those persons seeking employment. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Many as of our country opinion say nay. Are treatable with prolonged survival if detected early, and 30% of cancer patients can be provided with adequate symptom management and care. Deeply concerned that the cancer is the 3rd highest cause of morbidity in Kenya after infectious diseases, and to cater for cancer treatment and care. Will as many as of that of opinion say aye? Many as of our country opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 2. Frustrations and lack of employment, and also you find that people feel that they cannot cope with the current situation that is in the country and find them doing very bad things. We as a society and leaders, we must look for solutions after accessing the root causes of why people are fighting and killing each other, especially people who have been loving each other, a husband and a wife, a parent and their children, why they are killing each other. Mental illness is real in Kenya, and we need to address it. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a fact that work-related stress, high living cost of standards, induce mental problems leading to suicidal tendencies and dire consequences of domestic violence. Mr. Speaker, this motion calls for urgent interventions to arrest the worrying trend. Let us not wait until it is too late. An example is where you find, like a case in the US, you find there are shootings in a school, very shocking. Somebody walks in a school, in a kindergarten, decides to shoot all the children, the small children, and also you find a gunman killing 58 people in a concert. That is worrying. And we should not wait to find that Kenya gets to those levels when we know that we can intervene. Mr. Speaker, I strongly believe that there is a strong relationship between mental health and stable families, or rather, unstable, dysfunctional families. That is why our society must not stigmatize mentally ill Kenyans. Parents must learn also to recognize early warnings in their children, especially those in teenage years. Mr. Speaker, sir, I urge Kenyans from all walks of life to always seek counseling services whenever faced with stress emanating from either work, financial problems, and marital issues. On the other hand, also, I strongly appeal to the government and other key stakeholders to set up counseling centers in every county, and if possible, in every ward, so as we can reach every mwananchi. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I finish, I want to say that there is no reason as to why the community or local leaders cannot be trained to identify and counsel the local populace. We need also to see if the government also should intervene and train leaders, including pastors, teachers, church leaders, priests, chiefs, and social workers. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to fellow legislators to initiate programs and establish centers at county or sub-county levels that will identify persons who need counseling to avoid such tragic incidents. As the saying goes, a stitch in time saves 9. Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for the opportunity, and I'll call upon Honorable Kimilu Joshua, MP for Kaiti, to second this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You move? Of course, you beg to move. On record.
I beg to move this motion.
You've done it now, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll have Honorable Kimilu to second. And at the end of it, you must beg to second. I've given you the mic. Do you have a problem with that particular gadget? Again, let me try. You have it now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to second the motion by Honorable Ross Musio, who is the county representative for Makueni. He's also my county MP. Mr. Speaker, actually it's a major honor and a privilege to call upon to second the critical motion that addresses a major ignorance aspect of our society, Mr. Speaker. I must commend Honorable Ross Museo for attempting to address and expose some of the issue that people feel should be hidden away from the public glance, Mr. Speaker. It is a high time to address sensitive issues such as mental illness, Mr. Speaker. For a long time, shall we keep quiet about it, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I personally experienced that problem since I have a number of my constituents who are mentally sick. Mr. Speaker, I remember back in 1996, when I was in primary school, Mr. Speaker, we experienced a police officer who was killed, my mentally challenged person in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. And this is a serious matter, Mr. Speaker. Some are docile, others are violent. These violence in some occasion lead to physical harm, tragic accident, and even attempting death, Mr. Speaker. all over Kenya, mental problems are not recognized and given the attention they deserve. Mr. Speaker, who knows the extent they contribute to the crime level in our country? How many rape cases, killings, murder have occurred due to mental problem, Mr. Speaker, imbalance? Mr. Speaker, these are issues which we cannot forget about it, Mr. Speaker, or we cannot ignore, because it's becoming a challenge and an issue in our country, Mr. Speaker. I honestly think that mental problems should be accorded a high status as a national threat and disaster. Mr. Speaker, as my honorable colleagues have mentioned, there have been lethal mass shooting in the U.S. The latest calamity, last 58 people dead. In their schools, it has become a norm for such shootings, Mr. Speaker. In Kenya, who knows where this may happen? Mr. Speaker, it's just a matter of time. We are ignoring a time bomb. We seem to imagine it's only HIV, cancer, and road accidents, among other, that threat Kenya. Wrong, Mr. Speaker. The mental healthy Kenyans should be our biggest worry. We should ask ourselves, are Kenyans individually and collectively mentally healthy? Mr. Speaker, I support the new regulation by the government. Before you acquire a firearm, Mr. Speaker, you have to produce a letter from a doctor confirming the status of your, whether you are mentally fit, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, it has come to my attention that some of these challenges we tend to ignore. But, Mr. Speaker, this is a serious issue. We need to take it serious together. Mr. Speaker, we must, as leaders, initiate and implement programs and interventions that will address this forgotten issue. Let me pose this question, Mr. Speaker. How do we even determine whether even our leaders are mentally fit to lead our country, our counties? What happens when leaders exhibit such signs of bipolar disorder, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, sir, I support the motion, Mr. Speaker. Let us seriously challenge our mental experts in all fields to address this issue and show us a way forward, Mr. Speaker. I hope Honorable Musio will follow up on the initiative and come up with a bill to address this neglected segment of our society. Mr. Speaker, if I can remember, and I can go back to my constituency, Kaiti, Mr. Speaker, in every market, you can't miss one or two.
Please try and second, because your time is over.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every member is a witness that we have.
No, you've not seconded on record.
I second, Mr.
To,
Speaker.
I asked you to, and you still wanted to give us the history of Kaiti constituency. So I propose a question, which is that aware that there are over 200 classified types of mental disorders, the most common one being clinical depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Concerned that Kenya's mental health policy estimates that about 25% of our outpatients and about 40% of inpatients suffer from mental health conditions, with most frequent diagnosis of mental illness made in general hospital settings being depression, substance abuse, stress, and anxiety disorder. Deeply concerned that the current worrying trend of increased domestic violence among Kenyan families has resulted in suicides, death, injuries, and psychological trauma, orphaned and unstable children, noting that the prevalence of mental disorders may also be attributed to the noted cases of suicide, homicide, and violence at household level. Further noting that despite the strategies and guidelines that the government has put in place towards achieving the highest standard of mental health, prevalence of mental, Further noting that despite the strategies and guidelines that the government has put in place towards achieving the highest standard of mental health, prevalence of mental disorder remains high. This House urges the government to urgently establish program and intervention to encourage uptake of counseling services among individuals, families, and communities to mitigate the effect of mental disorders. And members should be encouraged in future to be making shorter motions for, it is good for everybody, including the persons who are proposing and putting questions. Now, I have a raft of members who want to contribute to this. The topmost, I realize, is from the same region as the ones who've just contributed, so I will go, let me see. Let's have Honorable Oduol Odhiambo. Professor,
Thank you,
sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. As I start, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say that even from a personal note, the kind of context and challenges that we experience in the country, Mr. Speaker, ranging not only from issues of unemployment and coming on to issues of poverty, changing gender roles that seem to now try and get people confused, even in terms of not only what it means for them in their context to be men, to be women, and to be people who are to provide and look after children. Looking at our children who, I think, Mr. Speaker, if most of us were to take note, we would see in the social media very disturbing images of our young people copying dances that are really unheard of. I would want to start from the onset by saying, Mr. Speaker, that indeed we find at this particular point in time that there is a much needed intervention to ensure that we have mental health and that we are able to indeed take advantage of the program. And so as I look at the motion, I would want to recognize that it is coming at a point in time where the social fabric of the family has broken, and the social support that a lot of us, regardless of our role as mothers, as fathers, as cousins, this has really been eroded. And we come to a context where we would want to continue to see how it is that we meet needs and how it is that we ensure that we feel in terms of our engagement accepted and recognized. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, would want, as I support this motion, to indeed urge that we take note, however, that the counseling that we engage in should be one that does not denigrate the entire cultural values or indigenous knowledge, because we find that quite a number of times when we engage in looking at counseling, we come across different cultural perspectives and different sorts of values, and we would hope that there would be room as the programs are rolled out, which is very, very much timely and needed, that there would be an opportunity for us to call on our indigenous knowledge and to truly benefit from the kinds of circumstances that some would call witchcraft, but which seemed to have worked before, or the spiritual engagement that we see those of us who are of faith engaging in. And so I want, as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, to indeed remind members that when we are talking about mental health, we might want to look out and only think that it affects those who are outside, those who we see perhaps in the marketplace or other places in hospital. But when we look at the incidents that took place in our country, Mr. Speaker, even as we recall the kind of incidents we've had after our election, and indeed even right now, every time we look at the headlines, that this is indeed a real threat and a cause that would want to one that we would want to keep looking at, so that we can have stability and we can have people in all walks of life, particularly leaders who are in the family, who are in the schools, who are in all other areas of work, engaging and performing to their maximum, and that we would be in a position to break the cultural attitude that looks down on counseling and embrace those structures in the programs that we offer. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'd like to support the motion.
Very well. Let's have Amin Kasim, member for Wajir East.
Thank you, Speaker.
Honorable members, so I'll give 2 members after Omar from this side.
Thank you, Speaker.
Probably 3. Proceed.
Okay, thank you, Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to express my interest in this motion. Indeed, it's a motion that is timely, and I think as a nation, most of the social network that has been there in the country has failed. We see young men and women engaging in a very obscene activities in the country. We have equally seen a number of youth who are of late, through other social medias, who are also engaged in a number of activities that are of no value to us as a society and as an African. So this motion, Mr. Speaker, I find it quite opportune for us to discuss as a nation, because what we have in that the entire youth, if you look at it, for those who are about 35% and less, are nearly 60% of the population of Kenya. And if we don't confront what is the unfolding as a country and as a nation, and we don't put in place measures that are likely to control effects of the society, I think we are going to degenerate, and we're going to breed a society that is wrecked, a society that has no future, and a society that is not likely to provide and nurture parenthood and all those that is of value to us as a Kenyan. So one thing I will be able to suggest, there are a number of issues that have been responsible for issues of failures of societal responsibilities. And the issues that are affecting us have come as a result of urbanization, has come as a result of even poverty, because poverty has stricken us, and most of the society do not have the social network, the social fabric that used to be there in the past and used to control, and emanating or effect of such cases has been disrupted. Because people are more urbanized, the social network is disrupted, people are not meeting, the churchgoers do not even handle issues that are really affecting the society at that moment. Even the people who go to the mosque do not bring in topics that are of significance to the society, that can hold the society together, a society that is likely to breed good governance among ourselves and within the families. So for one thing, this is a very timely issues that are affecting us. What we have seen, nearly 20% of the youth are likely to be affected by this. You may be seeing a gentleman who is walking along the streets, but naturally, he is affected by this kind of stuff. He needs a fallback. Just every institution in the country should have a counseling center or an office that offers counseling services. All institutions of higher learning should be able to be provided with a counseling, and this should be cascaded down to every institution. These are the issues we can be able to handle. They can open up. They can be able to discuss the issues that are affecting them. Employment has also been, a lack of employment within the youth has also been responsible for these issues. You will be able to be surprised. A child or a young man who has finished a graduate, his institution should have a counseling center. And all centers should be properly manned by people who can open up, people who can be able to provide services, so that these issues which are likely to affect our population is thwarted or controlled once for good.
Giving me this opportunity, I rise to support this motion by Honorable Member for Makueni. And Mr. Speaker.
Order, Honorable Pukose. Handshake will not be very useful here. Proceed, Honorable Member for Joro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed, Honorable Dr. Pukose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this motion. And issues of mental illness, Mr. Speaker, are a very big challenge, because more often you will find that the person having the mental illness does not understand that that person is mentally sick. Mr. Speaker, I'll give an example. For example, one time, 4 doctors went on a hunting. One of them was a surgeon, the other one was a pathologist, the other one was a physician, and the 4th one was a psychiatrist. Where
was the gynecologist?
Proceed the gynecologist, he shot it, it came down and gave it to the pathologist. The pathologist said the sample was not enough. So, Mr. Speaker, from that analogy, you can see the psychiatrist saying it is an ego, but does it know whether it's an ego? Complex case. You know, humanity is very complex. Mr. Speaker, you see in our roads, our drivers, the way they drive, causing accidents, causing mayhem, and especially in the matatu industry. These are people who should be subject. Can you sell all your possessions? These are mental cases. And more often, there is nobody within any society that does not understand this, forming cults where people are worshipped, where people move away even from God to worship individuals. So, Mr. Speaker, issues of mental illness is wide-ranging. It has far-reaching consequences, drugs, killings, which are occurring almost everywhere. You hear in the States, you hear where people are killing each other. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this very noble motion, and I urge that this House supports it. Thank you, Mr.
Programs and also the interventions to encourage uptake of counseling services. However, as I support it, I would wish that we expand our scope so that we don't just look at the mental illnesses. I know the mover was also an illness, but there will be the issue of stress. In fact, what is really affecting the Kenyan people as a social problem is stress and social problems. Coming back to the constituencies, we also lack counseling service. Of counseling, other groups have come in, whether they are coming from whatever section of the society, to pretend they are doing counseling, but at the end of the day, they end up misusing the people who really want the counseling services themselves. So it is in order, and I fully support of focus in these counseling services, and we make sure that the counselors or the teachers providing these services are remunerated for the work they are doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Without much ado, I beg to support.
Very well. Let's have Honorable Dr. Sankok.
Handling them in a manner that will even exaggerate their type of illness or disabilities. Mandate to assess, register, and advise on those with mental illness. They should offer their advice to the employees, the employers, offer their advice to institution of learning, and offer their advice to NTSA when they are registering our drivers on the streets, because we don't know if these drivers sometimes cause this accident because of diseases that are related with prevented before it happened. Honorable Speaker, majority and most of our kids who are below the age of 18.
First thing was to check whether he was mentally ill. And it turned out from what the community had said that in a week or so, this officer would be seen walking along and looking very unstable. But that information never got to the police department in good time or any administrator. Mr. Speaker, what I'm trying to say is this motion is very important. Health is now devolved. The counties should take charge. The national government is dealing with the policy. There should be a policy, Mr. Speaker, such that cases of mental illness are detected at the right moments and that in critical times, so that, Mr. Speaker, a lot of things we see and a lot of deaths we see can be stopped.
Order, members. I see Honorable Amunyinyi. What is it? What is out of order? Just a minute, member for. Yes, proceed now. No, it's only that you are relatively taller than the, so you can bend a little. and you'll be fine. Oh, that is not working, that's for sure. Let me try and, the next one would be, let's give you the next one.
Let me try this one.
Yes.
This one is working, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to raise on a point of order. Mr. Speaker, the motion before the House is such an important motion. And looking at the content, Mr. Speaker, and having recalled that this is a problem that we have had in this country and world over. We had attempted in the last Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and brought a motion, a bill which this House passed, the Councillors, Psychologists and Psychotherapists Bill, which now is an act, Mr. Speaker. It covers all these issues that are provided in this motion, and what is being prayed for is captured properly in the act, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, while I have no intention of scattering the motion, would I be in order, Mr. Speaker, to ask whether it would have been important that the implementation committee gives us the status of the act, whether this law has been implemented or not, because if the law was implemented, we would not be making the same prayers before the House, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, I hear you, Honorable Amunyinyi, and I'm actually alive to that because I was part of the members who participated in that particular debate. Now, but looking at the bill that was passed into law, which is law now, it was basically looking mostly to the way of managing the professionals in the sector. And indeed, yes, as you put it correctly, it also included some parts of what Honorable Rose Museo is proposing in the motion. But if Honorable Rose Museo is looking at the issues of the disorder and the rest, you actually helped in passing, the one which you sponsored. So he could put some amendments to some sections to even strengthen that particular one. Because if we look at the issue of the implementation committee, really once a law has been passed, I think the business of implementation committee will be a little overtaken. It will be something now that will be something that has to be followed. But really, I agree with you. The law that you helped sponsor catered for almost everything that what Honorable Rose Museo is.
Act. It establishes, but what Honorable Museo is bringing is the uptake of what Honorable Amunyinyi established. So actually they are complementing to each other because this is uptake of that service that Honorable Amunyinyi is already. Yes. So I think it will be important that at the implementation
purposes. Now, yours basically, Honorable Amunyinyi, was really the issue of training, registration, and the rest. What Honorable Rose Museo is bringing is probably just to improve a little, to include now the beneficiaries, the real beneficiaries in terms of those people who have...
The advice of your office in the last Parliament is that about motions, it's true it's for us to encourage members to be able to bring these kind of motions. But normally what you have always advised is, can you make a follow-up this act? Can we now go and improve on that act and bring an amendment that would now actualize what is being urged in this motion? And I think that is the way that your office has always directed, that in future any motion should materialize to a bill. I totally agree with what you're saying. Yes, it will complement or supplement this, but at the same time, it's good now to have
urging probably sometimes. But you see, that is what now the implementation committee should do. If we have a motion in place, the implementation committee can be able to thrash out some of these things so that can be sorted out, even not necessarily having to put it into law. But if she can mature it to become something that can amend that particular law that Honorable Amunyinyi has, it would be the better. So I'm sure the mover of the motion is hearing and listening. And I also see that, Honorable Nyamai, you are actually a former chair of the committee, not the current chair. But let me give you anyway. Probably you have something to speak to that one.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity. The purpose of So I would say that apart from the word urge, well, which is problematic already because the Honorable Speaker, you know, when we are doing motions, when we are structuring motions, we are being encouraged to use the word urge, even by the Secretariat at the table.
I see all, just before Wamunyinyi, let's hear Honorable Wanga, please. It's a very healthy thing, so I think I should open it a little for members to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the matter of the relatedness of what Honorable Museo has brought to the bill, when it comes to training of cadres and how a specific health cadre is regulated, it's very different from looking at implementing the issues that the Honorable Museo has raised. Because the bill on psychotherapists and psychologists, this ends up within that act, in an amendment in that act, or ends up in an act of its own, I think, Mr. Speaker, is a matter for the mover to pursue. So I just want to agree with you, Mr. Speaker, that this matter is on a path of its own that can only make better the act.
What I do not understand is why there is a lot of interest on this particular second bit. But
looking into our society, looking into our culture, Mr. Speaker, is very alive, and we are very much aware that our society, our culture...
No, are you contributing or you are on a point of order?
It's a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, let's go to it.
From what Honorable Wamunyinyi is saying, I think we really need these programs. And whether we have another act, whether we have another bill, I believe this program needs to be addressed in isolation, because the problem it's addressing in our society, it is very alive, and it cuts across the country, because our culture, Mr. Speaker, would want.
Back to the same mic.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. You can see that the matter as I raised has brought so much of clarification to the issues being sought, Mr. Speaker. And because of the clarity that this motion is urging government to establish programs and interventions to encourage uptake of counseling services among individuals, families, and communities to mitigate the effect of mental disorders. Mr. Speaker, like I said earlier, it's related to the existing law. But I think it's important that this bit be captured to the extent that that law is implemented and programs are put in place to ensure that Kenyans are served and they enjoy what is not in our society, the issue of counseling. The establishment of counseling units within schools, the establishment of counseling units within departments of government, the establishment of counseling units within our units, devolved units, even at sub-county and sub-location units in our country, Mr. Speaker. It is going to go a long way in ensuring that what is prayed by my sister, the honorable member, is realized and Kenyans are made to benefit from this service, Mr. Speaker, as was earlier envisaged by the law that was passed. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I have no problem the motion moving on, and of course with your guidance and members' interventions and contributions, it makes a lot of sense that we can improve on the existing law or can push for the implementation of the law as it was passed, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would want to refer members to Article 209 of our own standing orders, particularly, I said Article 209 in totality, but more specifically B in this specific case. Generally, of course, the Committee on Implementation, this is the work of the Committee on Implementation, that should scrutinize the resolutions of the House, including adopted committee reports, petitions, motions, and so forth. That would be for purposes of, even if, for example, the motion was just to pass the operationalization. Well, look at that particular one anyway. What I'm just saying is that you could also approach the committee, Honorable Wamunyinyi, and see the extent to which the particular laws that were passed were operationalized. So these are issues that you could approach the committee so that you can also help your colleagues and see how we can be able to put this together and improve the particular act that you helped to create. So this is something that I would ask that we proceed with the motion. It is good, it's complementary to what you passed, and I think we would be able to achieve more if this went ahead. So let's proceed with the member for Makueni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that even in very advanced democracies where enactment of laws has been and where matters health and mental health are very advanced, like the United States of America, recently when a former student walked into his school and shot children, innocent children, and the country was taken aback and was quickly looking for solutions when an event had happened. What we are doing with this motion, Mr. Speaker, is we are preparing ourselves so that we reduce occasions whereby such matters could happen. And according to this motion, Mr. Speaker, you realize that if teachers detect a student as a particular issue or mental issue, if there is someone in every market, because there's a say that every market has a mad person, and that mad person one day, Mr. Speaker, can turn against someone, or can turn against traders all of a sudden. It is now the responsibility, and this is the urging of this motion, Mr. Speaker, that somebody takes action right now, that the county government is, we have our own constituency offices, we have devolved units, we have a national government, we have hospitals, we have dispensaries, so that a counseling center or somebody can note this person is behaving abnormally and takes action. It can also happen in a family, Mr. Speaker. But most families which have that person, sort of a person with them, they don't know where to take that person, and they don't know when to act, and they don't know who to talk to in a lot of occasions. And before long, something happens with this particular person. A lot of suicide cases, Mr. Speaker, are people who are actually mentally sick, but the people around them have not taken any action, and all of a sudden you realize somebody who was very normal, very well schooled, with a very good job, very good qualification, all of a sudden commits suicide. Some of the cases, Mr. Speaker, are people already on medication, either on cancer medication, HIV, AIDS medication, and one day all of a sudden this person realizes, I no longer need to be alive, and the family is left, wondering, could we have done something about it? A lot of murder cases, Mr. Speaker, a lot of violence. The mover, Mr. Speaker, has talked about violence in the homes, or even family breakups, Mr. Speaker. Most of them are actually instigated by mental illness, which was not detected in good times. And even stress leads into mental illness, and not only that, leads into other diseases like heart diseases and high blood pressure and things like that. And if this is managed early enough, Mr. Speaker, by the health sector and by all of us working together as in this motion, Mr. Speaker, we'll be able to save lives, and we'll be able to take care of people and to handle a section of illness which has been ignored for a long time. And I really thank the Honorable Wamunyinyi for what he brought to Parliament. But now that particular law we have dealt with the professionals themselves. This motion is dealing with the people, the real situation. And if you marry the two, Mr. Speaker, we will have very good effect in the country. We'll get the implementation of that particular act. We'll get county governments who are dealing with health and getting a direction from the national policy, which is supposed to be handled by Ministry of Health. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I really want to urge members to support this. We begin acting, even by the constituents we represent. Begin looking for solutions, Mr. Speaker, for the people we see there looking mentally unwell. And also for teachers in the education sector to realize or to note such children who could develop such histories. And if those histories are documented early enough, then medication can be accorded. Mr. Speaker, I support and I thank you for giving me that information. Thank you.
Now we will have Honorable Lomorukai Kamais. You also still have a problem there as you look for a, yeah, you're okay, let's see.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this very important motion brought by Honorable Ross. Honorable Speaker, I think it will be very prudent that we seriously support this motion because the contents of the motion are so important, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, about 2 months ago, I visited our Director of Education to discuss on how we can help the teachers on issues of stress. Because, Honorable Speaker, there are so many teachers, so that those alcoholic persons who are there in our communities get proper ways of really living the issues of taking a lot of alcohol, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, I think it will be very important to help community groups or even individuals to try to end matters that lead into mental illness or issues that lead them really to indulge into other issues that really will affect their professions or their living, Honorable Speaker. I think with those few remarks, I beg to support this very important motion, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. We'll have Oyoka Oro, member for Bonchari.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the motion as brought by Honorable Museo. When you look at the system of education in the country at the moment, and that is where guidance and counseling should begin, because everybody in Kenya must go through a primary school or secondary school, and a few will go through colleges and universities. The issue of guidance and counseling is ignored, simply because it is not examinable. There is this necessary evil called examination-oriented education, as it is in Kenya today. If you go to a secondary school where timetabling for guidance and counseling is done, and you get into a class during that period, you might find somebody offering mathematics, somebody doing counseling places in our hospitals, in the barasas and everywhere. I fail to understand how those who are supposed to be guided or counseled will know that they are sick, because everybody says he's fine. When I look at myself, I say I'm fine. I don't need any guidance and counseling. Everybody else might be saying that. So apart from the people who are roaming the streets because they are sick, how shall we determine that so and so needs guidance and counseling? Maybe we need to look into that more closely. She was tested, and actually she was found to be drenched. She was not normal. She underwent treatment, and she's still on drugs, and the problem is actually subsiding. That's why I'm saying that we should look for ways of finding out who needs this, because people might be killed. There are men who have been killed, not because they have messed up anybody, but because they are derailed in their ways of thinking. With that, I support the motion. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Mr. Speaker.
All right. We shall have Ms. Shimboko, member for Likoni.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, I want to make my maiden speech, and I just want to thank the people of Likoni constituency for electing the first woman to represent the constituency. It was a very hotly contested battle, but I thank God that I managed to become the first woman MP in that constituency. I want to tell the people of Likoni constituency that I'm there to join effort with all the residents, those who voted me, those who didn't vote me, that all of us, we are Kenyans, we are the resident of that constituency, and we need to work together to ensure we better the lives of our people. I want to say asante sana, and I want to say may God bless them for trusting a woman to be in that position. It was really very tough, but at least we have put a good precedent, a good trend, so that those other girls or those other women who want to aspire in terms of politics, they can also compete with men and acquire such position. Thank you, the Likoni residents. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate my sister, Honorable Rose Museu, for coming up with this motion. This is a very important motion, Mr. Speaker, because I want to say that counseling, Mr. Speaker, is in such a way that an educational experience. It teaches somebody to understand some particular condition, such as depression, anxiety, and others. When you understand a particular condition, Mr. Speaker, you can be able to have some options on treatment or how you are going to tackle such an issue. Mr. Speaker, we have witnessed in our country, especially in the learning institution, in our secondary school, primary school, universities. We have seen students killing each other, students fighting each other, students burning the schools, and doing all sorts of evil things, Mr. Speaker. All these things, Mr. Speaker, could be avoided if only we could have effective centers in terms of counseling, if only we could have teachers who have the capacity of giving counseling services, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have also seen in our families that we have some dispute, especially in terms of inheritance, Mr. Speaker. In these processes, Mr. Speaker, we have seen families killing each other, fighting each other in terms of inheritance, Mr. Speaker. If only we could also devolve counseling services through the county government in our constituencies, in our learning institution, in our private sectors, and also in our public sectors, Mr. Speaker, I think we could really avoid all these things, Mr. Speaker. We have these people who have used hard drugs for so long time. They have gone for rehabilitation, Mr. Speaker. But if they don't get counseling, Mr. Speaker, they cannot get back their self-esteem. They cannot be in a position that they accept their position, Mr. Speaker. Then we also need to complement all these services in terms of rehabilitation with counseling services, so that at least these people can come back to the society, can again gain confidence in the society, and they can become better citizens. Mr. Speaker, we have also witnessed a lot of election conflicts in our country, the post-election conflicts. You can imagine there were tribal clashes. People killed each other, community killed each other, Mr. Speaker. If only we could not have some counseling services, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, the cohesion could not be there, Mr. Speaker. And I can attest today, even in my constituency, where there was the Kayabombo clashes, after that clashes, there were so many personnel who were brought in the constituency to give some counseling, especially to the youth who are involved in that issue, Mr. Speaker. So we really need to have this service so that we can have the issue of conflict resolution, peace buildings, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want to agree that we need to work hard and even come up with some amendment in terms of the mental health bill, Mr. Speaker. The mental health centers in our country is really wanting, Mr. Speaker. We have very few mental health centers. You can imagine in my county, we have only one at Portrees. The only center we have, it doesn't have enough equipment. We don't have the medical doctors. We have few resources so that those people who are affected can get some counseling. If we can have some counseling centers, then this can really complement. They can really complement the services they are getting, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also in our country, we have incurable diseases such as the HIV, AIDS. Mr. Speaker, for all these people to accept themselves and even return back their self-esteem, Mr. Speaker, they need a lot of counseling, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say it is high time that we have to devolve these services.
The Honorable Michi, that was a very good delivery. But it was not your maiden speech. That you had done a long time ago. A maiden speech is literally, as it were, like virginity. Once you lose it, you never regain it, whether you remarry or you. So this is your second time in this house, and you had done it in the other one. So those members who have intentions of making their maiden speeches, you need to understand the difference between a maiden speech and a speech in your second term. There's a difference. There's a technical difference. But very good delivery, the Honorable Mishi. I would like to give this opportunity to the Honorable Mukwana Kamala, member for Lurambi.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the motion by the Honorable Ross Museo on establishment of programs and interventions to encourage uptake of counseling services. Mr. Speaker, myself being also a bishop and having spent 2 years in the US in a counseling school, I realized that we have so many problems today in our society, and those problems can be solved through professional counseling. And as we move forward as a nation, as we move into this kind of life we live in, the life of modernization, whereby we are now almost in a global village where people are moving from one area to another, from one country to another country, we need to actually invest more in counseling services. We need to invest in counseling centers. When I was in school in the US, somebody was asking me, why will you do a Bachelor of Christian Counseling? Where will you take that to? And how much money will you earn out of that? But we realized that we have so many people that have so many problems that can be solved through counseling. And Mr. Speaker, even in the church, as I continue to serve in the church also, I've come across cases of men of the cloth that have not been trained in counseling. Yes, they have the gift to preach, but they have not been able to go through any formal education that will assist them to carry out their spiritual work with professionalism. For example, we had a case whereby a woman was having a problem with the husband, and she went to the pastor and said, my husband doesn't love me. I want you to pray for me. And so the pastor began to put it in practice. The pastor began to lay his hands on the woman. And the hands began to move and move and move from the head to the toes. And Mr. Speaker, it becomes a crime in our spiritual world and also in our society. It's just because people don't understand how it is done. And therefore, this motion is very important for us, for our country. When you look at our children, some of our children, we had a case whereby a young boy that was a high school going student committed suicide because the father was unable to pay school fees. Look at all those two things. I will die because you can't pay school fees. What about if we had a counseling opportunity where this boy will be counseled and another opportunity will have presented itself where the boy will be able to go to school? So it's very important that we support counseling services. We support this motion. We want some of these problems. People are today in jail, some are in prison, because some of them were not counseled in their situations of life. Some of the challenges that they underwent that maybe pushed them into committing the crimes, they would have been resolved maybe if they would have been taken to a counseling center or if they would have come into contact with a counseling person who has that knowledge to do so. And this should also be brought into our learning institutions, as earlier echoed by one of the honorable members in the House, that it should begin right from the bottom. We should not be thinking about it at the university level. But when we begin with ECD, primary school, high school, that's where it all begins. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to say I am in support of this motion.
Well, we shall have the Honorable Mbai Mbithuka, member for Kitui East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was up earlier on a point of order, but I'm pleased to be up again to address a motion in support. Mr. Speaker, looking at our society, there is a soft resistance from the population to counseling services. The elderly, the young people are suffering from conditions which would be addressed through counseling. But that has not permeated to our society that counseling is a kind of therapy. It can treat, it's scientific. Most of these conditions which would require counseling services have a psychological background. And you would visit when you talk to a traditional person, an African in the villages. Psychological issues, mental issues are kind of associated with curses by the elderly or even witchcraft, Mr. Speaker. When you talk to a psychologist, he will tell you it's all in your mind. Something you need to have a challenge to kind of maneuver around the world and earn some living and give back to society, give back to their parents, and they kind of give up and they end up into drugs. If they are girls, they end up to early or forced marriages or unwanted sex that brings in unwanted kids and planned kids. And Mr. Speaker, this can all be addressed through the psychological approach, which is, it is all in your mind. And unless and until that time, Mr. Speaker, the society will accept counseling as a scientific way of solving most of these issues, Mr. Speaker, we'll have a challenge that will consume our society, a challenge that is really hurting our youth, a challenge that is hurting the parents to this youth. And Mr. Speaker, I would advise and I would look into it in two ways. First of all is to establish the counseling fraternity. We have enough counselors in our primary schools, in our secondary schools, in our colleges. And this can be approached, Mr. Speaker, by training the teachers. Maybe P1 certificate, counseling services could be a course unit in the P1 curriculum, encouraging the community to accept counseling as a mode of treatment. If we manage with AIDS, Mr. Speaker, we can manage with these mental conditions. I beg to support. Thank you.
Very well. We shall have the Honorable Dr. Ombaka, member for Siaya.
It was to form associations and organizations that would be registered and they would be licensed and so on. It was the law that was actually establishing these institutions. But I think this particular bill is the services so that they can be healed. And these programs are good, but they're too few or they are not well established in schools, particularly in schools. Teachers are generally trained.
Government is able to provide counseling services. And the government should also come up with a program, an elaborate program where counselors are trained so that they have the skills of counseling. Mr. Speaker, we are lacking these counseling facilities, even in our hospitals. The sub-county hospitals, the county hospitals, we do not have these counseling facilities. Mr. Speaker, it's high time that the government embraces this aspect. And once this motion is passed, it will be upon the implementation committee, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the debate that is being adopted by this House is implemented. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion. Thank you.
Very well. The Honorable Indikiri, member for Buri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I like to support this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, I come from a constituency, Bole constituency, which is very highly cosmopolitan. We have the largest farms in Meru, wheat farms, flour farms. Mr. Speaker, in the recent past, as my colleagues have said, we have witnessed a very unique trend where a father wakes up, acts his wife to death, together with the children, and hangs himself. And this is a very hard-working person, meaning there is a problem as people grow. Mr. Speaker, and they, Facebook, TV, and all that, our youth are trying to adjust to the life in America because of what they are seeing in the TVs. Our youth are trying to imitate the lifestyles of the West. That handshake, in as much as it is good, it has caused a bit of a problem. Some of us require counseling. And this counseling cannot be done in Nairobi. It needs to be done at the constituency level, because now where they are relying on Hulu, from the basic, as you grow up, if it's a kid in school, or if it is a teacher in school, it is just another concern for everybody. So, Mr. Speaker, my comment would be, and my statement will be, the counseling centers need to be joined with other...
Because of the handshake. Interesting. We shall have the Honorable Mukwe Lusweti, member for Kabuchai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important motion. Today, I was reading an article on WhatsApp, and Ms. Matiba was narrating how she was tortured, how she was beaten, and eventually the husband also went through such a stress. Mr. Speaker, such a things really stress our people, and such people need to be cancelled. There are those who are jailed, Mr. Speaker, innocently. They stay in prison for 10 years. Mr. Speaker, we have IDPs in Bungoma, across Bungoma County, who lived there, land in 1992 up to now. They have not been resettled. They are living in makeshifts. During rainy season like what we are going through, Mr. Speaker, they don't have shelter, they don't have food, their children are not going to school. So, Mr. Speaker, such a people ought to be cancelled. Yes, die in dormitory. Mr. Speaker, it really stresses parents because you expect your child to go to school, come back and maybe assist you in life. But then he dies hopelessly like that. Mr. Speaker, I want to support and thank you for giving me a chance.
Life not sick, whether you are have a chronic illness, whether you have a mental illness, you need counseling. I support the bill.
Very well. The next one was the Honorable Mabonga was next. Yes, proceed, the Honorable Mabonga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish also to raise and support the motion that has been brought by Mheshimiwa Ross. Mr. Speaker, one thing we ought to realize that in most cases we are spending a lot of money on symptoms instead of dealing with the real problem. Today in schools, and I would suggest that these counseling services, Mr. Speaker, goes up to the lowest unit of the government operations, even up to the chief's office. Because you can see a tree, it's standing with fruit, it's very green, but it has a bacterial infection. And that is most of our people are operating that way, in self-denial because of the things that are going through. So I would suggest that we set aside a fund that can at least assist people to access these kind of services. Thank you, Mheshimiwa, giving me a minute just to contribute on this very important motion. Thanks a lot.
The Honorable Museu was the third one. What is his name? Could you press the intervention slot so that I... Yes. The
Thank
Honorable Ala Ondiki, member for Machoki.
Yes.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity. And also want to give echo to my colleague, Honorable Ross, for this motion. I want to stand and rise and support this motion 100% because it's a very critical motion. Counseling should be introduced every aspect and everywhere in our various communities. I'm also proposing that if we can have a subject in our education sector that will make sure even our children undergo counseling as one of the aspects in the daily life running. we see various things are happening in our country. Domestic violence at the moment, people are doing bad things. If you look at our homes, it's because of stress. We have problems, but because we are lacking these basic counseling aspects, people are doing bad things. Others, thank you very much. Because of time, I stand to support.
Bro, the Honorable Mr. Could you wind down? You have 2 minutes remaining.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to be guided. You say I have 10 minutes to reply?
You had 5 minutes. You have contributed. You have given 3 out. You have 2 now.
To reply?
Probably 1.5 to finish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to thank members for their positive contributions and very healthy. And I believe the government will look into it and set up centers to access these counseling services. In the beginning, I think I take Honorable Wamunyinyi's concern that there was an act for the same. But as my argument is that Honorable Wamunyinyi, his act is talking about the professionals and also legalizing their services. Njoki Ndung'u also brought an act like that one on gender-based violence. Njoki Ndung'u's act was on dealing with the perpetrators. But myself, I'm talking about the preventions on why we should not get where to what is happening in our families and also with our people. So I wish to reply that I still seek that the government should look into this issue and help us start centers or establish centers in every country that every Kenyan can access this very, very important service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, the Honorable Monsieur, it's a wrap. I will direct that we move to the next business on the order paper.
Order number 11, motion, establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency.
The Honorable Martha Ongari.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the motion, establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency, that aware that every birth in Kenya must be registered by the Department of Civil Registration and documented through a birth certificate. Further aware that subsequent registration of citizens and acquisition of documents such as identity cards and passports, school admissions, registration of exams, and access to opportunities such as employment depends and relies on birth certificates. Deeply concerned that the Department of Civil Registration Services has over time experienced backlogs in the issuance of birth certificates as a result of, among other factors, inadequate personnel, unwillingness to embrace information, communication, and technology, ICT, inadequate funding, and inadequate materials used in registration of persons. Further, deeply concerned that registration services are not easily accessible to majority of Kenyans owing to the few registration centers in place. This House urges the government to consider establishing civil registration centers in every constituency and ensure full implementation of the Kenya Citizens and Foreign Nationals Management Service Act 2011. I beg to move, Mr. Speaker. And from the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to confirm that the issue of birth certificates, however simple it looks, however simple it should be, has become a nightmare in every constituency, in every part of this country, Mr. Speaker. Recently, Dr. Matiang'i, the former minister, or rather cabinet secretary in charge of education, launched what is known as the KIMIS. It is the National Education Management Information System. This system, Mr. Speaker, is supposed to get a unique number to every pupil who joins class 1. It would be able to capture their age, capture their academic performance, capture their parents' economic status, and more importantly, help the government in terms of the allocation of resources to schools. Mr. Speaker, this system would also be linked to the integrated population registration system that is run by the government. And Mr. Speaker, it has been a nightmare, and I know many members can relate to it. Why? Because the civil registration centers in this country are about 139. 139 is not even half of the number of the constituencies that we have in this country, which is 290. And to illustrate it, Mr. Speaker, I would use my region. We, as a constituency, are supposed to go to Naivasha. If you go to Naivasha today, in that office, I did that one day and I walked there at about 8:30 in the morning. I found more than 500 people who have come from Gilgil, from Naivasha, both joined in one center. That center, Mr. Speaker, has only one registration clerk, has one registrar, and 2 clerks that were supposed to be doing that job. And the population in my constituency is estimated to be about 300. The births every day, the population is growing day by day. And Mr. Speaker, when you get a birth notification, you're supposed to wait, I think, for 90 days, then you can be able to get a birth certificate. But this new requirement, previously, the registration for the birth certificate for exam is what was required to have a birth certificate. But right now, over 3 million kids have not been registered. And I know this is not just a problem in my constituency. And Mr. Speaker, even when we tried to get, to facilitate that office to actually go to Gilgil or to other constituencies, like a mobile clinic kind of thing, it was almost impossible because even the 3 clerks cannot be able to handle the backlog of over 300,000 constituents and others that are more in Naivasha. Mr. Speaker, the pain that people have suffered, if I illustrate in my constituency, if you have someone living from Elementaita ward, which is kind of the farthest from Naivasha or Kongasis, you spend like 2,000 shillings to actually reach Naivasha. You go to Naivasha, you don't go home with that birth certificate. It is rounds and rounds and rounds. The Ministry of Education had given a deadline that was not tenable. It was reviewed to be 31st March. Still, it was not tenable. I think as it stands right now, it has been extended to I don't know when, because it is a nightmare. It is not possible. This department, Mr. Speaker, is able to make some money. I don't know what it does with that money, because you pay for some, I think 600 shillings or so to be able to get a birth certificate. But you will still have issues of having no paper to print birth certificates. To be in a whole county, the distances to be covered are impossible. So you spend 2,000, you're not even sure you'll go home with it, you go another day, you go another day. It is becoming a nightmare, Mr. Speaker. And even to the budget committee in this house, I think we need to relook at this department. Even constituency have the right to have a registrar. And I know most of these members in this house have even people where they can house them. Those who have big and constructed CDF offices. I had offered in my own country, Mr. Speaker, let this department get enough funding to be able to get at least a registrar and 2 clerks in every constituency, Mr. Speaker. That way, then it shouldn't be a nightmare. We shouldn't be able to punish our children just because I don't know why this government, some of these government departments are not really quick to uptake this. I hope they can be able to automate this process. Let us go paperless. Let us be able, like we are doing with the NTSA and the driving license. By the time you hit 18, all these other documents, you want them to get the birth certificates from if it is meant to work. So, Mr. Speaker, this motion is that straightforward, and I would beg the House to support it. And, Mr. Speaker, it will be able to sort out so many issues that people are going through right now. Even as the floods are...
Really walk to the offices and get services, then the issue of registration of students will be easier. The other day, I read a report in the newspaper saying that so far the Ministry of Education has registered these numbers. They were unable to register simply because the children don't have birth certificates, but the kids are in school. They exist. So it's very, very important to have this kind of service taken to the constituencies. One thing that we require is not about building structures for these officers. We only need staffing levels. The birth rate is very high. We're having between 6 and 7 children per household. That is the least. So when you have this number of children in each of the households and you cannot get them birth certificates, where do they go? And the requirement. So I want to urge this House really to support this motion with a lot of keen interest, because
Members, I propose the question that aware that every birth in Kenya must be registered by the Department of Civil Registration and documented through a birth certificate, further aware that subsequent registration. I see a lot of interest in this, and the first one on my list is the Honorable Tayan Stephen, the member for Kinango.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipatia nafasi hii kuchangia mjadala huu kuhusu mambo ya uandikishaji wa vitambulisho na stakabadhi za kuzaliwa. Kusema kweli Mheshimiwa Spika, mwanzo katika eneo bunge langu hii ni shida sugu sana, ambapo wananchi wanapata tabu sana kwa kupata huduma hii ambayo ni muhimu sana katika nchi yetu. Utaona ya kwamba wale wafanyikazi ili waweze waende wakaandikishe wananchi, na pia tunavyojua hivi sasa wanafunzi wote, kama huna cheti cha kuzaliwa hawaandikishwi katika shule yote, na wanafunzi wengi sana hawana hivi vyeti. Ikiwa nchi atembee mbali, ni kitu kidogo sana ambacho kinaweza kufanywa kutumia teknolojia ili wananchi wapate huduma hii. Kwa hivyo mimi nashukuru sana kwa muda huu na ninaunga mkono mjadala huu. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
The Honorable Jaldisa Dida, member for Isiolo.
Of children in school were introduced. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, we have a lot of infrastructure challenges in most parts of this country. And I will give you an example of Isiolo County, where we only have 700 kilometers is about 4,000 Kenya shilling. Therefore, it is a burden to already burden citizen of my county, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, when one registrar is required to forget about the internet, but even communication. Therefore, it's a real challenge to. Another burden, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of infrastructure.
Grassroots. Yes, there are issues to do with the risk of registering foreigners and all that. But honestly, it is not every part of this country which has that danger. And even so, it is upon the government itself to know its people. I doubt whether the government of Kenya knows its people deep enough. So, Mr. Speaker, it is very important that we have registration at every constituency. This will make it easier for the parent, make it easier for the child. I'm looking at that child who is an orphan. I'm looking at that child who is an orphan, left to the grandmother, left to a poor villagers. Instead of the government making it easier for that kid, it is making it difficult. Mr. Speaker, as I said, my constituency is a cosmopolitan, Madam Wangali, to consider those constituencies with more than one district, like mine. They are given 2 registration centers because we need the services down to the community. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this novel motion. Thank you.
Response. When you are elected by your people, you are elected to come here and discuss legislation and to move motions like these ones. And how you do it in your personal life is none of their business. And Mr. Speaker, on that note, I just want to say one of the reasons I admire her, and she reminds me for this country, and I send my condolences again to the family. So it has, come at a time, it's been difficult therefore, Mr. Speaker, because the women members of parliament had wanted us to put aside a day just to discuss that. Coming back to the motion at hand, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that having worked at the cradle, because of the way that we have put up our registration system, most of them were not able to access registration documents. And without that birth registration documents, you are not able to access schools, you are not able to access any other social service at this country. Our own villages. They know who is the son of who has given birth to a child with 2 fingers or 4 fingers. I mean, they know all those very specific details within the village. So, Mr. Speaker, if you are able to devolve this to that level, then even as a country, it would help us instead of putting even a lot of money on census. If you are able at this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. The Honorable Mbogo Menza, member for Kisau.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to comment on this important motion that has been brought here by Honorable Martha Wangari. And I think from the onset level. But having said that, registrations of persons is a matter of national security. Today, we know that civil registration has not been devolved to the counties. It is still a matter that is with the national government. For these civil registration centers to be devolved to the constituency level. And we as members of parliament, since we have two key functions that we are allowed to do on the CDF kit, that is education and security, then it's actually opened a corruption window. Because if you want to get your document in good time to be expedited, then we have all these cartels and brokers who will come in between and say we can get you this document within shortest time possible. It has gone to another level. Late last year, Mr. Speaker, sir, a new directive was issued by the Minister of Education, whereby students and pupils, whether you're in class 1, whether you are sitting for your national exams, whether you are in high school, you must have a birth certificate for you to be registered. Done, we can even have the chiefs or the assistant chiefs.
The Honorable Mbogo, I know you have a lot to say on this, but you only had 5 minutes and you have used them up. I will give this opportunity to the Honorable Mwangaza.
Time for our people, especially in Meru, where one is supposed to travel over 250 kilometers, paying fare of over 1,000 to go to the centers to register for birth certificates. I want to support this motion by saying that we should have every food, fetch water, and everything that needs to be taken care in a family. I want to say that every woman suffers a lot because of these birth certificates. And it is the time that the government now should set up the same age group, waste a lot of time going for centers which have very long queues. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to support this motion by Mother Wangari by saying that we should have them, not even by constituencies, by ones. Or if it is very impossible for the government to do that, let the government empower the religion and the bishops.
Mheshimiwa Martha Wangari kwa kuona kuwa ameleta hoja hii ambayo ni muhimu sana katika maisha ya watu wetu katika nchi hii ya Kenya. Kama vile ambavyo ameweza kuzungumza, tumeona Mheshimiwa Spika kuwa amesema pata huduma hii ni muhimu kwa serikali pia izingatie miundo msingi katika zile sehemu ambazo watu kwenda kupata huduma kama hii. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, nachukua fursa hii na mimi kumuunga mkono Mheshimiwa Martha kwa hoja hii ile ambayo ameleta, na vile vile kushukuru kwa kunipatia fursa hii kuweza kuchangia. Asante sana.
All right. We shall have the Honorable Tepo Koropo, member for Isiolo South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank Mother Wangari for the motion. Mr. Speaker, sir, I come from the pastoralist community that is in the Isiolo district. The first time I saw a birth certificate, Mr. Speaker, was when I was reporting to university. I had gone to the registrar of births asking for the same, and he asked why I needed a birth certificate, and I told him it was needed at the University of Nairobi where I was going to register. Mr. Speaker, we need to appreciate the fact that in mostly the pastoral areas,
the pastoralist communities do not know and do not see the need for birth certificate. They actually do not know that a document referred to as birth certificate exists. Most of our students ask for birth certificate when it is demanded by institutions in this country. Mr. Speaker, the reason why they do not know is because Isiolo District Headquarters is about 283 kilometers from Sericho. Hawaii is about 290 kilometers. That's the farthest point from in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, it will be a huge task for one to travel over rough roads where there are no public vehicles to go to district headquarters to be asking for a birth certificate. You will need minimum of 7 days to seek the same. You can appreciate the cost one will incur in traveling and staying at the county headquarters just to get one birth certificate. So, in order to avoid that, people do not register births. It is high time that the government, through this request by our able lady, see the need to establish centers at each district, at each constituency headquarters. Mr. Speaker, further to this, will actually urge the government to not only register, put offices in each constituency, but actually even have mobile station in pastoralist areas, because herders will move where there's pasture. Where there's pasture, there's no office. So it is necessary that we have mobile stations, because during elections we have mobile stations. Why don't we have mobile birth registration centers where people can be registered? It may be, my suggestion is we should be willing and ready even to use our CDF fund, if it is possible, for these centers to be registered so that our kids can get birth, our children can get birth certificate, and then they can secure birth ID and other necessary documents. With these two remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
All right. The Honorable Mboni Mwalika, member for Kitui Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion. And I would like to thank Honorable Mother Wangari for bringing up this motion. Mr. Speaker, as we stand now, this is an issue which is actually long overdue. Currently, to get these certificates has become very expensive, because people have to travel long distances so that they can be able to get them. Secondly, because of the shortages of P1, corruption has come in. To get that form, our people have to bribe the people who have them. So it's very important to bring these centers where the people are. And the motto of this country and the government is to bring services near to the people. And actually, I will propose that we should not actually establish only one center. Some constituencies are very big. Maybe we may have to propose that we establish more than one center in each constituency, so that at least we can be able to cater for everybody. But also, these centers should be manned by trained people. And we also provide them with computing equipment and, of course, the materials. And also want to propose that the children should also be issued with that birth certificates in the hospitals. When they are born, before they leave the hospitals, they are given the certificates. I remember I used to work with the National Bureau of Statistics. And one issue, one biggest challenge in civil registration is budget allocation. I had an opportunity to manage a World Bank funded project, and I actually was funding them. And I realized that they did not even have computing equipment. So if you talk about these centers and the efficient system, then we need to give them finances, enough finances, so that they can be able to issue these certificates. This country, we are in the process of creating what we call comprehensive integrated population register. And that's why now civil registration comes in. Because we need to know somebody when he was born and when he leaves this country. All the activities, what this person has been able to do. And one of the instruments which can help us is civil registration, in terms of registering people, and of course getting information from the person, so that at least if we see this is so and so, we can be able to trace that person to the time he leaves this country. It is also going to help us in terms of population, especially on what we call head count. Population and also census has more, it carries more information apart from counting. But the head count, because we'll be able to know how many people have been born and how many people have left. So therefore, I start to support this motion. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Shinali, member for Ikoloman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stand to support this motion, first I welcome you back from Australia, Commonwealth Games. Welcome back. Honorable Mother Ongare is a person I know because we worked together. Her abilities from the party level, she was our treasurer in UDF, and this is how I find myself in Jubilee. I take this opportunity to congratulate her for bringing this bill. I need also just to reveal that I was making, I was also doing a motion. She just overtook me, so it is an idea I really support. Mr. Speaker, it amazes me which country we live in, where leaders, when they are handling for votes, they make identity cards free, and these are for adult people. Mr. Speaker, birth certificates that we are now discussing here are for our children, people who don't work, people who want to start knowing that they are Kenyans, because a birth certificate is the first document one requires to know that is a citizen of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, these children are born in sub-locations. A woman gets pregnant and takes for 9 months. So an assistant chief already knows that such a woman is pregnant. They go to hospitals to give birth. At least, even if we are missing any detail, we know the mother of the child.
The Honorable Shinali, how does the assistant chief know that the woman is pregnant?
Pregnancy is not something you can hide, Mr. Speaker, with your guidance, because we can see. And some of us who have families, we can see. But that is not the point. The point is the duration that a woman is pregnant is long enough, and having to visit a hospital for several times, at least we have the details. We shouldn't have to take children who are born through a tedious exercise to get this document. We want these documents. I'm requesting that these documents be issued on the hospital level, in the hospitals the child are built, are given birth, and even primary schools where we have head teachers and teachers who come from the locality. They can get the details for the parents and the children, and forward the same for issuance of birth certificate. Mr. Speaker, this exercise I believe should have done gradually, because it has now created a lot of backlog. And number two, we have cartels that have come up. Right now, the cost of a birth certificate is within something to do with 1,000 and 2,000 shillings, and the distance to get birth certificates, and there's very many times that our parents visit those centers to get this birth certificate is painful. We need to ease the way birth certificates are issued, so that our people can live an easy life and access these documents in an easy way, other than having to spend the little and the time that they should be working to go and look for this particular document. As we move on, Mr. Speaker, I want to request Honorable Mother Wangare to move further and propose amendments, so that the suggestions we are discussing here now are put in the necessary legislations, so that what we discuss here is put in the necessary legislations and becomes law. Mr. Speaker, as I finish, I want also to support.
Honorable Shenali, your 5 minutes have run, but I think your point is made, and I hope the Honorable Larry is taking notes as she goes along, that she needs to move this to the next level, really. From your contributions and the contributions of the Honorable Menza, the member for Likoni, it is clear that this needs to be done, and generally all the contributions from all the members. Moving on, I would like to give this opportunity to the Honorable Rosa Akinyi, county woman representative for this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this motion. From the onset, I'd like to say that when Honorable Martha speaks to this motion, she's actually speaking to every part of this country. Mr. Speaker, most of Kenya is rural, and most of Kenya has challenges with their infrastructure. As a result, travel or transport costs is high. And yet we know that, from documented records, that more than 50% of this country live below poverty line. In other words, most of those people cannot afford to even put a meal on their table. And yet we do expect them to spend money to travel far and wide in search of birth certificates. Mr. Speaker, we know that it's mandatory for every school-going child to have a birth certificate. We also know that most of the challenges of the poor families or the economically challenged families is money. Mr. Speaker, the costs and the charges that they have to pay for the birth certificates is exorbitant, and they are not able to afford it if they cannot even afford to eat. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk to the spirit of devolution. Devolution is supposed to bring services closer to the people, and yet our people have to travel far and wide to look for certificates that are mandatory to their lives. Mr. Speaker, other than just taking these centers to the constituency level, I support and request that the government must devolve these centers right down to the ward level, so that most of our people can access or have easy access to these centers. That is the only time that devolution will become a reality. Otherwise, if people still have to travel far and wide, if people still have to spend a lot of money for a certificate that is now mandatory to their lives, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter how much money we've spent on devolution. Devolution will remain a myth to most of us. Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I stand to support and to congratulate Honorable Martha for coming up with a motion that actually affects each and every family in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. The Honorable Mizigi Mnene, member for Taita Taveta.
Asante sana Mr. Speaker kwa kunipatia fursa hii hata mimi niweze kuchangia
kwa mswada huu ambao ni wa muhimu sana kwetu sisi haswa kina mama. Zoezi hili la kutafuta vyeti vya kuzaliwa linatuhusu sana, na nachukua fursa hii kumpongeza Mheshimiwa Martha kwa kulifikiria hili na kulileta hapa bungeni ili tuweze kulijadili. Ni kweli Bwana Spika, mambo ya kutafuta vyeti hivi vya kuzaliwa vimekuwa kero, na ni kero kwa wananchi wote wa Kenya. Ni shida sana, wananchi wanasafiri mbali, wanaenda wakirudishwa, wanatumia pesa nyingi, na kila wakifika pale wanaambiwa bado rudi, njoo kesho. Hivi majuzi kule kwetu Taita Taveta, hata yale makaratasi ya kuchapisha vyeti hivyo yalikuwa hakuna. Kwa hivyo ilikuwa ni usumbufu mtupu, ni kungoja, na pia wakienda kule mashuleni wanarudishwa, wanaambiwa ni lazima walete vyeti hivyo. Na imekuwa ni kero sana, manake vyeti ni vya muhimu. Hawezi kupata nani ya kusafiri kama pasipoti mpaka uwe na cheti kile cha kuzaliwa. Kwa hivyo mimi naunga mkono ya kwamba mswala huu ni wa muhimu, na tunaomba vyeti hivi viweze kupatikana kwa urahisi. Huduma hii ya kutoa vyeti vya kuzaliwa iweze kuboreshwa na iwe rahisi kwa mwananchi kuvipata vyeti hivi. Kama vinaweza kuletwa kwa ward level itakuwa vizuri zaidi. Asante sana Mr. Speaker kwa kunipatia fursa hii, na nazidi kumpongeza dadangu Martha kwa kuleta mswala huu bungeni ili tuweze kusaidia wananchi pale nje. Asante sana.
Very well. The Honorable Chris Aseka, member for Gwisero.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this motion. I certainly may congratulate Honorable Martha Wangari for such a noble motion that I know it affects everybody and every Kenyan. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this country is a data-hungry country. And Mr. Speaker, without proper and accurate data, which can only be got through civil registration, we cannot have accurate policies. It's bad for this House that the policies we make are not supported by any data that is accurate. Mr. Speaker, we are a House that does budgeting for this nation and approves the budget. Our budget, Mr. Speaker, is based on information that is not supported. We cannot have a budget for the nation that is for development without knowing how many people we have, how many young people we have, how many people have left, and so forth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, data is important to ensuring transparency in the distribution of national resources. We have a problem in this country that some areas have enormous and have been allocated more resources based on a data that is not substantiated. Mr. Speaker, we have areas that getting a birth certificate is very difficult. But we have areas in this country where getting a birth certificate is very easy. I represent people of Gwisero. 20 years down the line, when Gwisero was made a district headquarters, we have never had an officer posted in charge of civil registration. Mr. Speaker, the challenge may not be district levels or constituency levels. The challenge is the number of employees that are there in the Department of Civil Registration. It is a simple thing that the Ministry of Internal Security and the Department of Civil Registration should just employ Kenyans and post them as civil registrars in each and every constituency, and more so, we can even devolve this to our respective wards. Mr. Speaker, it pains a time as a leader, and I know you also represent a constituency, that people travel kilometers and kilometers just looking for one vital document, a birth certificate. My people in Huisero travels to Butere district. People from Matungu goes to Butere district. That 3 districts or 4 districts converge in one district just looking for a vital document. Something that the Department of Civil Registration could have just employed people, post them to this district quarters, and facilitated the acquisition of this document. Mr. Speaker, I support this motion, and I want this motion as a House, we follow it up. It should not just form the basis of archives in government departments. We should follow it up to ensure that whatever we decide as a House on this motion is implemented. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Mishimboko on top of my list, but I would like to give this opportunity to the county woman representative for Mombasa.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii. Kwanza nampongoza Mheshimiwa Martha Wangari kwa hoja hii. Mheshimiwa Spika, hili limekuwa kama janga ndani ya miji yetu, ndani ya Mombasa na Kenya mzima. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu ya umaskini, kuna wazazi wengine hawana pesa hata ya kulipia zile birth notification. Wanapozaa ndani ya manyumba, hawaendi kuandikisha watoto wao. Kuna wazazi wengine wanapeleka watoto clinic, Mheshimiwa Spika. Baada ya muda wa miezi 9 kumaliza clinic au mwaka mzima, yule mzazi kulingana na yale makaazi pale ndani ya nyumbani wanapoteza zile clinic cards, Mheshimiwa. Wanapokwenda kutaka kufanya uandikishaji, ni lazima uwe uko na notification na uwe uko na ile kadi ya hospitali ya chanjo, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia pia ndoa za mapema, unakuta mtoto anazaa mtoto. Wakati wa kuchukua hii mama hana kitambulisho, kuandikisha mtoto hayuko. Tunakuta wajane, wale single mothers, mama ambaye sio kuwa na mume. Ukifika kule unaambiwa lete kitambulisho cha baba. Kama huna kitambulisho cha baba unaenda kwa wakili, Mheshimiwa Spika, ili uende upate oath kuwapa kwa wakili na kuleta, na hizo zote ni senti, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, kama tunavyosema tunataka wazalendo wa Kenya waweze kupata stakabadhi hizi kwa urahisi katika center, tuweze kujenga hizi huduma katika constituency. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi naomba sana, tena naomba sana kwa sababu ya kwamba hapo awali wakati mimi nikienda shule mwaka 1983 niliweza kushikilia sikio, Mheshimiwa Spika, na nikaweza kuingizwa darasani. Kwa hivyo serikali yetu ichukulie maanani vyeti hivi viweze kupeanwa, Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa urahisi, wazazi waweze kupata nafasi hii. Na vile vile Mheshimiwa Spika, nakumbuka mimi mwenyewe nikimaliza kidato cha 4 nilipatiwa kitambulisho changu shuleni huko Giriamani, Kazonzo Girls. Watu walikuja, waandishi pale shuleni, wakasema wale wamefikisha miaka 18 waje wajiandikishe, na tukaweza kupatiwa ID card zetu katika mashule na tunazitumia hadi leo. Mheshimiwa Spika, sioni kwa nini iwe na njia ngumu ya wazazi kuweza kupata shida hii. Tunaomba ya kwamba kulingana na ombi la mheshimiwa liweze kutiliwa maanani na ili waweze kupata stakabadhi hizi. Mheshimiwa Spika, naunga mkono hoja hii na nina imani ya kwamba serikali itatilia maanani because kwa sababu pole Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu kabla hatujaingia katika mfumo huu wa sasa wa kidijitali mambo haya yote yalikuwa yanaweza kupatikana. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika, na naunga mkono hoja hii.
The Honorable Murgor, member for Keyo North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to put my voice on this motion on establishment of civil registration centers in every constituency. From the start, I would like to say I support this motion. And once I want to thank Honorable Wangari for bringing this motion. Mr. Speaker, a birth certificate is a very important document. Without a birth certificate, Mr. Speaker, children will not be able to be registered in schools. You will not be able to get an ID card. You'll not be able to get a passport, and even employment, Mr. Speaker. So birth certificate as it is an essential document. Mr. Speaker, people, the citizens of this country, and particularly I saw it this year when Ministry of Education insisted on birth certificates for school children. My constituency happens to be in the headquarters of the county, and therefore we have a registration center. But my neighboring constituency, which is Keyo South, doesn't have a registration center. And you'll find some people have to travel 100, 150 kilometers to get that certificate. And I saw for myself, Mr. Speaker, women spent almost 3 days, 100, 150 kilometers from their homes. As a matter of fact, you wonder where they were sleeping. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this motion that actually every constituency should have a registration center. And in any case, it would be even better to have mobile registration centers, which will be going around, particularly on market days, so that they can capture as many citizens to be registered as possible. Finally, Mr. Speaker, birth notification. As you realize, not all children are born in hospital. And therefore, those born at home, I believe the assistant chiefs actually should be given the responsibility of registering those who are born at home. And that makes things easier. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I support this motion. Thank you.
Very well. Members, this motion still has 45 minutes, but we have run out of time for now. Therefore, honorable members, the time being 1 p.m., this House stands adjourned till today, Wednesday, 18th April 2018 at 2:30 p.m.